Imagine being stuck in the middle of the sky with a manic scientist next to you and increasingly desperate conditions that you haven't prepared for. Welcome to the Aeronauts 2019, a film about two peeps getting stuck in the skies and only barely survive through some pretty neat tricks. Let's go. Our protagonist, Amelia Wren, a skilled aeronaut and widowed mother, is on her way to setting the new record for flying an air balloon higher than ever before, when she has visions of a man falling down the sky. Seeing Amelia in utter confusion and distress, her sister Antonia advises her not to do something she isn't comfortable doing, but it seems like our ambitious aeronaut has already made up her mind. In addition, she is in agreement with Mr. James Glacier, a passionate and dedicated scientist who is determined to use a hot air balloon to collect important data about atmosphere and weather patterns. Although James often faces skepticism and ridicule, he is not ready to give up on his passion. Before the flight, a skilled engineer and James' friend, John, advises him to postpone today's trip due to extreme weather conditions. However, James is prepared to embark on the journey at all costs. Probably not a red flag to overlook if your life depends on it. Now, unlike James, Amelia is a real showstopper. Her adventurous spirit sets the spectators aglow as she makes a warm entrance, igniting the entire area with pure joy and laughter. James is feeling the pressure of time slipping away, but Amelia's performance seems to be going on without a care in the world, oblivious to the fact that they may lose the time frame for accurate readings. However, the crowd gathered to witness the duo break the height record got much more than they expected. After given non-stop entertainment, Amelia flies the balloon only to unleash yet another fun performance with the help of the dog she has brought with her. As the balloon rises higher, she throws her dog out of the basket, which causes a parachute to deploy and safely land the pup on the ground. Now, James, the scientist that he is clearly unhappy with extra fun and entertainment, as he only wants to focus on the discoveries that he will uncover. After a brief argument, he takes us back to 2 years earlier when he used to predict weather and was determined to ride a hot air balloon one day to take precise readings. However, instead of being praised by his colleagues, he has always been considered a maniac and a dreamer. Now, in a meeting with the scientific community members, he reveals that the progress made with the balloon will be nothing short of revolutionary. With the help of this incredible technique, he says, they can propel meteorology forward by decades. Despite hearing the benefits of James's trip to the skies, the head scientist, Charles Green, accuses him of greediness, saying he only wants to take his balloon. But James is not deterred, fueled by his belief that uncovering advanced weather patterns could save lives and prevent chaos. Not only is James up against the scientific community, but he's also facing pushback from his dad, who has grown tired of his son's seemingly unattainable dreams. Back to the present day, our protagonists have ascended to a dizzying height of 5,400 feet. James takes readings of their progress and carefully tucks the results into a small metal cylinder, ready to be sent down to the ground for the scientific community members to review. Now, things were going quite well until the air pressure began to change faster than James had anticipated. Every reading he took this morning was quite clear, but now it is changing unexpectedly. Before the duo can do anything, a strong storm hits the balloon, putting their lives in danger. Let the games begin, my friends. With tremendous force, the wind tosses the balloon around like a playful kite, threatening to send our heroes hurtling towards the ground below. In this chaotic situation, James can do nothing but recall John's warning about the unstable weather conditions that he chose to ignore. Although the basket is not made of conductive material that can attract lightning, plenty of other threats must be considered. Firstly, it must be said that our characters are not traveling in a hot air balloon. They use what is known as a gas balloon, using lighter than air gases such as helium and hydrogen to ascend. This means regulating altitude for our characters is generally more difficult. The only way to do that is by throwing out weights to ascend and releasing gas to descend. Nowadays, hot air balloons won't take off if there are winds stronger than 12 miles per hour, which seems to be exceeded in this movie. Now, no pilot would take off with a storm warning being present. But what if we end up in a storm regardless? Well, one approach is to descend to a lower altitude, where the winds are less strong and the lightning bolts are less likely to strike. Think of it like taking the express elevator down to the lobby. It might not be as thrilling as the penthouse, but at least you're not going to be zapped to death. Another option is to fly around the storm, using the wind currents to navigate around it and avoid most dangerous areas. This requires a skilled pilot who is able to read the weather and make quick decisions based on changing conditions. As the balloon basket swirls around in the unforgivable storm, James loses control and falls with his head hitting the base. Now, despite bleeding from the head, James gets up and stops Emilia, who seems to be descending the balloon to escape the storm. Saying that this is his one and only opportunity, he instructs Emilia not to return to the ground, to which our aeronaut reveals her actual plan. According to her, there are two ways to break a storm, one to travel below it and the other to travel above it. To break this storm, Emilia has decided to go for the second option, but the wind has other plans. In a sudden twist of events, the gust seize control over the balloon's course, leaving Emilia precariously dangling outside the basket. Thankfully, James, who managed to stay inside, ties himself to a rope and rescues his colleague. After a heroic struggle, the duo finally makes it back to the basket, with their hearts pounding with adrenaline. Emilia springs into action and tosses out a few sandbags, causing a rapid ascension due to less weight. Finally, they emerge victorious, soaring above the clouds into a serene, beautiful clear blue sky. Now, as they celebrate defeating the deadly storm, we see John using his telescope to keep an eye on the balloon. Now, while traveling into the sky, James got to see wonders of nature he never saw before. Even though he just almost lost his life, he can't help but feel excited about the things that just happened. Up in the air, the balloon floats through the clouds, but for Emilia, the sight triggers a bunch of bitter memories. A rush of panic goes through her body, leaving her back in utter shock and distress. The movie then flashes back to a few months earlier, where we find Emilia locked up in her own room. After her husband's death 2 years ago, she couldn't help but isolate herself from the outside world, avoiding parties, adventures, and even laughter. Wanting to help lift her sister's spirits, Antonia came up with a brilliant plan: a party. She extends a warm invitation to her lavish event, to which Emilia unwillingly agrees. While everybody is busy enjoying the party, Emilia is approached by James, who doesn't even have an invitation to tonight's event. Being a high-class lady, Emilia knows which suits are in trend and which are borrowed to sneak into a party. Realizing that he can no longer hide his reality, James decides to reveal the reason behind his lie. It turns out that he needs Emilia's balloon to go on an expedition that can not only help him unlock the mysteries of the weather, but can also be saving grace for humanity. Their journey can revolutionize agriculture and help the world better prepare for natural disasters like floods, droughts, and famines. When James delivers his powerful speech, it profoundly affects Emilia's mind. Suddenly, she feels a burning desire to achieve something great and help humanity. Clearly, Antonia is unhappy with her decision, as she thinks Emilia should marry a gentleman and settle to achieve the ultimate happiness in her life. Instead of listening to her elder sister though, Emilia responds that she's really a good aeronaut and wants to use what she's good at for the common good. Back in the sky, the duo is over 17,000 feet from the ground and the weather has dramatically improved. Seeing Emilia lost in her thoughts, James finally asks her about her late husband, Pierre. Before she can say anything, a group of stunning yellow butterflies appear out of nowhere and surround the balloon, leaving both of them utterly mesmerized by the breathtaking sight. While talking about her husband, Emilia's eyes are filled with tears as she reveals how her husband had a profound and genuine love for the beauty of the world. As the two talk, the movie flashes back again to when the world's strongest and largest lighter-than-air balloon manufacture was underway. Recalling the terrible incident that happened to her 2 years ago, Emilia gets terrified enough to call off the expedition she planned with James. She heads to the institute and informs James about her decision, saying that she doesn't want to risk flying with him. Although James tries to persuade her, it seems like she has already decided to never fly again. As if a bad day at work wasn't enough, James arrives at home to find his father's memory is up to its old tricks again, causing him to forget the simplest things and even his own son. As James steps into the room, his father's memory clicks into gear, luckily, and he greets James with a warm smile and even offers words of encouragement for his upcoming expedition. Now, contrary to what James expected, he even gets a precious tool for his journey, a pair of binoculars that will help him make the most of his trip to the skies. Now back to the present day, Amelia and James have broken the world record by flying higher than anyone before them. They are now at 23,000 feet and the temperature is only 21 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way below freezing point. To inform his sponsor and colleagues about the record they have set, James once again sends the readings through a messenger pigeon. Things are great until James' health begins to deteriorate. He didn't bring the proper clothing necessary to survive in cold weather, which a scientist should know better, right? On the other hand, the balloon, which is ascending even faster now due to thin air, needs to be slowed down before the air gets too thin and the condition even colder. But unlike James, who is determined to fly higher into the skies, Amelia is concerned about his health. As she tries to make a descent, James gets out of control and, steered by his inflated ego and ambition, tries to stop her. Desperate to see more of nature and advance science with more discoveries, he advises Amelia to break the cold by traveling up, just like they escaped the storm. Although Amelia agrees to give him more time to soar in the open sky, aware of the dangers that lurk beyond a certain altitude, she extracts a promise from him that they will not venture too high. Whatever that means, right? So firstly, the lack of appropriate clothing for a sub-zero temperature environment is a silly mistake committed by a weather scientist. Also, they didn't seem to have any plans in place when they started the ascension. It more sounds like, hey, let's ascend as high as possible. Well, how high exactly? Until we die? Or until we stop at some point? If we stop at one point, when is that? Lack of planning leads to inevitable misunderstandings, as we have just seen. Uncontrolled ascension will lead to lower oxygen density, which will lead to lightheadedness and dizziness. The worst thing for our characters to happen would be to lose consciousness and continue rising until they die and sometime later crash down as if Zeus slam dunked them from the sky. Granted, this movie takes place in a time where those things were not yet discovered, but it would make much more sense for them to ascend to a fixed height and then call it a day. Then prepare again for the next ascension and top that record while exploring higher altitudes. This would minimize risks, eliminate misunderstandings, and would ensure a framework to operate safely in. We then cut to John visiting Amelia a few weeks ago after she had cancelled the expedition. It seems like he is here to persuade her to continue working on the mission. He shows Amelia how James drew pictures of snowflake formation and worked on studying the mathematical possibilities of nature. Although some of his assumptions are not always right, John still thinks that his friend has the potential to change the world and introduce science with mind-blowing new discoveries. Saying that it's her responsibility to take up the opportunity she is given, he departs, leaving Amelia in utter confusion and distress. For consolation, she visits her beloved husband's grave. Back in the present, the balloon has covered 26,500 feet of altitude. That is almost 8,000 meters for my metric friends out there. Also, the temperature dropped to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which is now minus 15 Celsius. That is pretty lethal if you ask me. In fact, one may experience hypothermia in as little as 20 minutes under these conditions. And since we already know that James has not packed appropriate clothing, this would be the right point to make a descent, especially after having already achieved the new record. Now, after sending the last pigeon to the ground with the new readings, James decides to ascend even higher, proving that the real enemy is his ego and not the harsh conditions they're exposed to. Amelia leaps into action and prevents him from further reducing the weight by throwing yet another sandbag out of the basket. However, the worst is yet to come, as James begins to bleed due to a lack of oxygen. Now, this medical condition is called cerebral hypoxia, which occurs when the brain is deprived of adequate oxygen. In some cases, symptoms may develop gradually over time, while in other cases, they may appear suddenly. Now, James has already experienced the disease's major symptoms, so he must descend before losing his life to his stubbornness, and to that extent, of course, saving his colleague's life as well. So what would you do if you were faced with a stubborn, egocentric maniac that is willing to risk his own life and your life only to prove his inferiority complex to be true? Well, Amelia should go for a knockout, take control over the balloon, and safely land back to the ground. But I also want to mention that none of this would have happened if they determined the extent of their excursion. If Amelia knew about this guy's recklessness, she would have never embarked on his journey. And if she would have not embarked, he would not have had a balloon, meaning these troubles could have easily been prevented by just having a conversation beforehand. Anyways, back to our characters, who are not only facing physical challenges but also emotional ones now. In order to justify his desperate self, James blatantly talks wrongly about Amelia's husband, saying that he risked her life for his own recklessness, oblivious of his own actions right now. Fed up from James's odd behavior and careless attitude, Amelia finally reveals how her husband died and how she made the same mistake James is making right now. It turns out that Amelia was the one who risked the balloon and ascended it beyond the safe limits with her husband, causing the seams to rip apart. Although Pierre, her husband, tried to stop her, it was too late to take action as the balloon started to fall at incredible speed. And that is when Pierre made the ultimate sacrifice for the love of his life. He knew that simply emptying the balloon basket wouldn't be enough to slow down the out-of-control balloon. So without a moment's hesitation, he made the decision to jump off the basket, sacrificing his own life to save his beloved wife. And since then, Amelia has never been able to forgive herself for the one mistake that took another person's life. After listening to this story, James apologizes for his reckless attitude and finally agrees to lower the balloon. But the problems have only just begun. The gas release valve is now frozen, so Amelia must decide to get to the top of the balloon and open the valve by herself. She ties a rope around her waist and descends until she reaches the top. Now when nothing works, she uses her boots to keep the valve open. But before she can return, she goes unconscious on the balloon surface. Now if you haven't noticed, that's a pretty bad spot to lose consciousness at. The freezing temperatures should have ringed alarm bells the moment they have read them on the thermostat. In fact, beside the storm warnings they have ignored at the beginning, the temperature was the only other major red flag they have overlooked. That it causes frostbite is annoying and potentially lethal, but not as lethal as a dysfunctional valve that, if unusable, will trigger a death rate of 100%. Now, things get out of control when the gust of wind moves the balloon in a way that causes our aeronauts to be left hanging from the rope. After regaining consciousness, Amelia wakes up only to find herself stuck in the middle of the sky. With fearless courage, sharp wits, and impressive ingenuity, she deftly swings through the air using the weight of her body to gracefully soar back into the basket. James finally recovers too, and feels much better than before, magically. Everything seems back to normal again until Amelia senses yet another terrible thing ahead. A gas leak, and loss in pressure as well, which causes the balloon to slowly collapse, leading to an inevitable crash landing sometime soon. Now there are actually a few things that you can do if you ever found yourself in this very realistic situation. Now first of all, throw out all excessive weight, right? That means everything. There shouldn't be anything left inside the basket but yourselves. This helps the balloon become lighter and the fall less rapid. It would also be beneficial to try and spot potential areas to crash land on. A rocky mountainside? Probably not that good. A body of water? Well, probably one of the better solutions, right? Our protagonists proceed similarly, although they get rid of much more than just excessive weight. They throw out the basket too. Bold move, but quite smart, right? Now they hold onto the upper frame tightly and the balloon slows down enough for our heroes to land on the ground without breaking their bones. While James falls into the trees, things get a bit more scary for Amelia as she is dragged on the ground with her one leg still tied to the frame. As the sun sets, Amelia slowly awakens from a state of unconsciousness. As she looks around, she realizes that James is nowhere to be found. Panic sets in as she begins to call out his name, hoping for a response and fearing that he might have died. After a long wait, James appears from the shadows with a pretty big smile on his face. Alright. Amelia feels relieved that her friend is okay and is filled with a newfound sense of hope. They return safely to their loved ones, and the critics who once were against this expedition now praise our courageous heroes for everything they have achieved. Their journey has not only been a personal victory, but also a groundbreaking scientific achievement. James' meticulous recording of data showed that the atmosphere has different layers within it, a discovery that led to the very first scientific weather forecast. As their families and colleagues shower them with praise and adoration, Amelia and James can't help but feel an immense sense of pride. Who wouldn't, right? They have achieved something that few people could ever dream of, and they have done it together. As the movie comes to an end, we see our protagonists embark yet on another expedition to the skies. They know that their journey has only just begun, and that the skies are full of endless possibilities for those brave enough to explore them. All in all, pretty beautiful movie, if you ask me. Hope you've still enjoyed this video though, and yeah, let me know what you think. With that said, thanks for watching, my friends, and I catch you again on Thursday with a proper how to beat video. Until then, take care and binge another one.